The forest was quiet, except for the soft rustling of leaves as a gentle breeze swept through the towering pines. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. It was late afternoon and the world seemed peaceful. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, and somewhere deep in the woods a stream babbled over smooth stones. The stillness felt almost sacred, untouched by anything unnatural. But then something changed. High above the trees, a strange object glided silently through the air. It wasn't like any bird or plane. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly glow, reflecting colors that didn't belong to Earth's spectrum. The craft moved without sound, hovering for a moment before descending slowly toward the dense canopy below. If anyone had been watching, they might have thought it was some kind of trick of the light, a mirage caused by heat rising from the ground. But there was no one around to see it. Deep within the forest, two people were completely unaware of what was happening above them. Jake and Lily had spent most of their lives studying wildlife, dedicating themselves to understanding the delicate balance between animals and their environment. They worked at a small research outpost located miles away from civilization, surrounded by nothing but trees, rivers, and mountains. Their days were filled with tracking animal movements, collecting data, and documenting behaviors. To outsiders, it might have sounded boring, but to Jake and Lily, it was everything. Jake was tall and lean, with dark hair that he rarely bothered to comb. He wore sturdy boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt, all practical choices for someone who spent most of his time outdoors. His face was weathered from years of exposure to the elements, but his eyes were sharp and observant. Lily, on the other hand, was shorter, with curly brown hair tied back into a loose ponytail. She carried a notebook everywhere she went, jotting down notes about every little detail she noticed. Her voice was calm and steady, often soothing when Jake got too excited about something. On this particular day, the pair had ventured farther than usual. They were following a trail left by a black bear they'd been observing for weeks. The bear had become part of their routine, its movements predictable yet fascinating. As they walked, Lily paused to adjust the strap of her backpack while Jake scanned the area ahead. "Do you hear that?" Lily asked suddenly, tilting her head slightly. Jake stopped walking and listened. At first, he heard nothing unusual, just the usual sounds of the forest. Then, faintly, he caught it. A low hum, almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere above them. It wasn't loud enough to startle either of them, but it was definitely out of place. "What is that?" Lily whispered, her brow furrowing. "I don't know," Jake replied, squinting up at the sky. Through gaps in the trees he could see patches of blue, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. "Maybe it's just wind or something." Lily nodded, though she didn't look convinced. She trusted Jake's instincts. He usually knew what he was talking about, but this time something felt different. She couldn't explain why, but the feeling lingered as they continued along the path. After another 10 minutes of walking, the hum grew louder. This time it was unmistakable. It wasn't wind, it was mechanical, rhythmic, and oddly hypnotic. Both of them froze in their tracks, exchanging concerned glances. Whatever it was getting closer. "Should we turn back?" Lily asked, gripping the strap of her bag tightly. "No," Jake said after a moment's hesitation. "Let's check it out. If it's dangerous, we'll leave, but we need to know what's going on." Reluctantly, Lily agreed. Together they pushed forward, moving cautiously now. The forest seemed darker here, the trees growing closer together until the sunlight barely reached the ground. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. Finally, they emerged into a clearing. What they saw made both of them stop dead in. Their tracks in the center of the open space. The source of the humming became clear. A metallic object sat partially embedded in the earth, its surface gleaming despite the lack of direct sunlight. It looked like nothing they'd ever seen before. Smooth, seamless, and impossibly advanced. There were no visible seams or bolts, no signs of how it had landed or even if it was man-made. "Is that a spaceship?" Lily murmured, her voice trembling. "I don't think so," Jake replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure. "It doesn't look like anything NASA would build." They approached it carefully, circling the object while keeping a safe distance. Up close, it was even stranger. The metal seemed to shift slightly under the light, changing hues as if alive. Tiny symbols etched into its surface pulsed faintly, glowing with a soft blue light. Neither of them recognized the markings. They weren't letters or numbers from any known language. "What do you think it is?" Lily asked, her curiosity outweighing her fear. "I have no idea," Jake admitted. "But whatever it is, it's not from around here." As they stood there, debating whether to touch it or take pictures, the object emitted a sudden burst of energy. A beam of light shot upward, disappearing into the treetops. Jake instinctively grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her back, shielding her behind him. For a few seconds they waited, hearts pounding, expecting something dramatic to happen. But nothing did. The light faded, and the object returned to its previous state, silent and still. Slowly, Jake released his grip on Lily's arm. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at her. She nodded, though her hands were shaking. "Yeah, I'm fine, but what just happened?" "I don't know," Jake said again, frustration creeping into his voice. "But we should get out of here. Whoever or whatever put this thing here might come back." Lily hesitated. "Wait, shouldn't we at least try to figure out what it does? Maybe it's important." Jake considered this for a moment. He hated leaving questions unanswered, especially when it came to something as bizarre as this. But he also knew better than to take unnecessary risks. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll take some photos and grab a sample if we can, then we'll go." Working quickly, they snapped several pictures with their phones and examined the surrounding area for clues. Near the base of the object, they found fragments of scorched earth and tiny shards of metal scattered across the ground. Jake picked up one of the shards, turning it over in his fingers. It was lightweight and cool to the touch, unlike anything he'd ever handled before. "Let's take this with us," he said, slipping it into his pocket. "If nothing else, it'll give us something to analyze later." With their evidence collected, they began retracing their steps back toward the outpost. As they walked, neither of them spoke much. Both were lost in thought, trying to make sense of what they'd seen. Was it alien? Government? Some kind of experimental technology gone wrong? None of the possibilities seemed satisfying. By the time they reached the cabin, night had fallen. The temperature had dropped significantly, and the stars shone brightly overhead. Inside, they spread their findings out on the table, examining the shard under a magnifying glass and reviewing the photos on Jake's laptop. "This doesn't make any sense," Lily said, leaning back in her chair. "It's not human, it has to be alien." Jake shrugged. Maybe it's just something we've never seen before. Either way, we need to be careful. If whoever owns this thing finds out we're poking around..." He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. They both understood the implications. If the object truly belonged to extraterrestrials, then they were dealing with forces far beyond their comprehension. And that thought was both thrilling and terrifying. For now, though, all they could do was wait and see what happened next. The next morning, Jake and Lily woke up early, their minds still racing with questions about the strange object they had found. Neither of them had slept well. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of leaves outside had made them jump. They knew they couldn't ignore what they'd discovered, but they also weren't sure how to proceed. The shard they'd brought back was sitting on the table, glinting faintly in the morning light. It seemed harmless enough, but it was a constant reminder that something extraordinary and possibly dangerous was happening. Lily poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table, staring at the shard. "What do you think we should do now?" she asked, breaking the silence. Jake leaned against the counter, sipping his own coffee. He looked tired but determined. "We need to figure out if that thing is still active," he said. "If it's sending signals or doing something else, we should know about it." Lily nodded. "And if it belongs to aliens, what then?" Jake hesitated. "I don't know. But we can't just sit here and wait for them to show up. If they're watching us, we might already be in trouble." They decided to head back to the clearing after breakfast. This time they packed extra supplies, a camera, notebooks, gloves, and a small toolkit just in case they needed to investigate further. As they walked through the forest, the air felt heavier than usual, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. The hum they'd heard the day before was gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. When they reached the clearing, the object was exactly where they'd left it. Nothing had changed. It still sat there, gleaming faintly in the sunlight, its surface smooth and unmarked. Jake approached it cautiously, circling it slowly while Lily hung back, jotting down notes. "Anything new?" she called out softly. "Not really," Jake replied. "It looks the same, but I'm going to try touching it again." He pulled on a pair of gloves and reached out, pressing his hand gently against the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the object began to glow brighter, the symbols etched into its surface lighting up with a soft blue hue. Jake yanked his hand back instinctively, stepping away. "What did you do?" Lily asked, her voice tense. "I didn't do anything," Jake said, shaking his head. "It just reacted." Before they could decide what to do next, a low rumble filled the air. It started faintly, almost like distant thunder, but quickly grew louder. Both of them turned toward the sky, searching for the source of the noise. Through gaps in the treetops, they saw something descending rapidly, a large, sleek craft that looked similar to the object in the clearing, but much bigger. "Oh no," Lily whispered, gripping Jake's arm. "Is that a ship?" Jake didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the craft as it hovered above the clearing, casting a shadow over everything below. It was massive, easily dwarfing the trees around it. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the sunlight in dazzling patterns. Slowly, it lowered itself until it was just a few feet off the ground. For a moment, nothing moved. The forest was deathly silent, as though even the animals had sensed the presence of something unnatural. Then, a section of the ship opened, revealing a glowing doorway. Two figures stepped out. They weren't human. The creatures were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and smooth gray skin that seemed to absorb the light. Their heads were large and oval-shaped, with wide black eyes that dominated their faces. They wore fitted suits that shimmered faintly, matching the color of their ship. Despite their alien appearance, their movements were graceful and deliberate, exuding an air of calm authority. Jake and Lily froze, unsure of what to do. The creatures didn't seem hostile. They simply stood there, observing the humans with detached curiosity. One of them raised a hand, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a series of symbols pulsing softly in rhythm with the hum coming from the smaller object. "They're trying to communicate," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure how to respond. He glanced at Lily, who was clutching her notebook tightly. "Do you think they understand us?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But we have to try." Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped forward. "We mean no harm," he said slowly, raising his hands to show he wasn't carrying any weapons. His voice sounded shaky, even to him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We are researchers. We study this forest." The aliens tilted their heads slightly, as if processing his words. Then one of them gestured toward the smaller object, pointing at it and then at Jake and Lily. The message was clear. They wanted to know why the humans had taken it. "We found it," Jake explained, pointing at the object and then back at himself. "We didn't know what it was. We thought it might be important." The aliens exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. Then one of them stepped closer, extending a long, thin arm. A device on its wrist lit up, projecting another hologram. This time, it showed images of Earth's animals, wolves, bears, deer, and birds, all moving peacefully across the screen. The aliens pointed at the images, then at Jake and Lily, as if asking a question. "They're showing us animals," Lily whispered. "Maybe they want to know how we fit into this ecosystem." Jake nodded. "We're part of it," he said, gesturing toward the forest around them. "We live here. We study these animals." The aliens seemed intrigued, but not entirely convinced. One of them activated another hologram, this time showing a predator chasing its prey. The scene was violent and chaotic, ending with the predator victorious. The aliens pointed at the image, then at Jake and Lily again. They're asking if we're predators, Lily realized, her eyes widening. Jake hesitated. Not exactly, he said carefully. We protect the animals. We don't hunt them unless we have to. The aliens exchanged another glance, their heads tilting in unison. It was impossible to tell what they were thinking, but their body language suggested skepticism. Finally, one of them stepped back, gesturing for Jake and Lily to follow them. Toward the ship. Do you think we should go? Lily asked nervously. I don't see much of a choice, Jake replied. If we run, they'll probably chase us. And if they're advanced enough to build that ship, they could find us anyway. Reluctantly, Lily agreed. Together, they followed the aliens into the glowing doorway, stepping aboard the ship for the first time. Inside, the walls curved smoothly, creating a seamless interior that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The air smelled metallic but not unpleasant, and the temperature was cool and comfortable. Lights pulsed softly along the floor. Guiding them forward, the aliens led them to a large chamber filled with holographic displays. Images of Earth's animals floated in midair, accompanied by streams of data written in symbols neither Jake nor Lily could understand. One of the aliens gestured for them to sit on a bench-like structure, which adjusted itself automatically to fit their shapes. For the next hour, the aliens bombarded them with questions, or at least, that's what it felt like. Using a combination of gestures, holograms, and sounds, they tried to learn more about humanity. They showed images of cities, farms, oceans, and deserts, clearly fascinated by the diversity of Earth's environments. They also displayed scenes of conflict wars, natural disasters, and acts of violence, watching closely for Jake and Lily's reactions. They're testing us, Lily whispered to Jake during a brief pause. They want to know if we're dangerous. And so far they don't seem impressed, Jake muttered under his breath. Eventually the questioning stopped. The aliens conferred quietly among themselves, their voices low and melodic. After a few minutes, one of them turned back to Jake and Lily, projecting a final hologram. It showed Earth surrounded by stars, with a message written in glowing letters. Though the words were unfamiliar, the meaning was clear. They were leaving. They're done, Jake said, standing up. They've seen enough. As they were escorted back to the clearing, Jake and Lily exchanged worried glances. What had the aliens concluded? Were they planning to return? Or had they decided Earth wasn't worth their time? When they reached the edge of the forest, the aliens gave them one last look before boarding their ship. With a soft hum, the craft lifted off the ground, rising higher and higher until it disappeared into the clouds. The smaller object remained behind, inert once again. Well, Lily said finally, breaking the silence. That was something. Jake nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, something we'll never forget. But as they walked back to the cabin, both of them couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Whatever the aliens had learned, it was only the beginning. The days following the alien encounter felt surreal for Jake and Lily. They went about their usual routines, tracking animals, recording data, and maintaining their cabin, but their minds were elsewhere. Every rustle in the bush, every shadow that moved across the ground made them glance over their shoulders. Had the aliens truly left, or were they still watching from somewhere unseen? The thought lingered like a cloud, heavy and unshakable dot. Despite their unease, they decided to focus on what they did best, studying the forest. If the aliens returned, or if anyone else came looking, they wanted to be prepared. The shard they'd brought back from the clearing sat on the table, untouched since their return. Neither of them had the courage to examine it further. It was a reminder of how little they understood about what had happened, and how much was still unknown. One afternoon, as they sat outside the cabin eating lunch, Lily broke the silence. "What do you think they're doing now?" she asked, staring off into the distance. Jake shrugged, chewing slowly. "Hard to say. Maybe they're reporting back to whoever sent them. Or maybe they've already written us off as boring." Lily frowned. "Do you really think they found us boring?" "Not exactly," Jake admitted. "But we didn't give them much to go on." We told them we protect animals, not hunt them. To someone who's probably used to dealing with advanced civilizations, that might not seem impressive. Lily sighed, picking at her food. I just wish we could have shown them more. Proven that we're not completely harmless. Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to prove we're dangerous? No, Lily said quickly. But I want them to understand that we're capable. That we're not just passive observers, we're part of this ecosystem too. We adapt, we survive. Isn't that worth something? Jake thought about it for a moment. Maybe, he said finally. But how do you show something like that to an alien? Before Lily could answer, a sudden noise interrupted them, a low whirring sound, similar to the one they'd heard when the alien ship first arrived. Both of them froze, exchanging wide-eyed looks. Slowly, they turned toward the source of the sound. Through the trees, they saw a small drone hovering above the ground. It was shaped like a sphere, with glowing lights pulsing softly along its surface. Unlike the massive ship they'd encountered before, this device was tiny and unassuming but unmistakably alien. It floated closer, stopping just a few feet. Away from them. It's one of theirs, Jake whispered, standing up cautiously. What's it doing here? Lily stood beside him, clutching her notebook tightly. Maybe it's spying on us. The drone didn't react to their presence. Instead, it began moving slowly through the forest, zigzagging between trees as though searching for something. Jake and Lily followed it at a safe distance, curious but wary. After several minutes, the drone stopped near a cluster of bush where a family of foxes had been living. The animals scattered as soon as the drone approached, disappearing into the underbrush. They're studying the animals. Lily realized, watching the drone scan the area with faint beams of light, just like they showed us in those holograms. Jake nodded. They're trying to figure out if Earth's predators are dangerous. But foxes aren't exactly apex predators, Lily pointed out. If they're looking for examples of real strength, they're not going to find it here. Jake hesitated, then turned to her with a determined look. Maybe we can help them. See things differently? How? Lily asked, confused. We'll show them what humans are capable of, Jake explained. We'll set up a demonstration, something that proves we're not just passive observers. Something that shows we're hunters, strategists, survivors. Lily's eyes widened. You mean actually hunt something? Not for sport, Jake clarified quickly. But yeah, something controlled. We'll use our skills to track and take down a target, just like we would in survival situations. And we'll make sure they're watching. Lily bit her lip, considering the idea. It's risky. What if they misinterpret it? What if they think we're a threat? They already. No, we're intelligent, Jake countered. This isn't about scaring them, it's about earning their respect. If they see us as equals instead of weaklings, maybe they'll leave us alone. After a long pause, Lily nodded reluctantly. Okay, let's do it, but we need to be careful. Over the next few days, Jake and Lily planned their demonstration. Carefully. They chose a location deep in the forest, far from their cabin but close enough to monitor. Using their knowledge of animal behavior, they identified a herd of elk that frequented the area. Elk were large, powerful creatures, not quite apex predators, but impressive enough to make an impact. They also set up camera traps in motion, sensors around the site, hoping to capture footage of the alien drones in action on the morning of the demonstration. Jake and Lily packed their gear and headed into the woods. They carried minimal supplies, just enough to last them through the day, and wore clothing designed for stealth. As they walked, they kept an eye out for signs of the drones, knowing the aliens were likely watching them. When they reached the chosen spot, they began setting up. Jake marked trails with subtle markers, creating paths that would guide the elk toward a specific clearing. Lily positioned herself nearby, ready to use recorded animal calls to lure the herd closer. Everything was calculated, precise, and deliberate. By mid-afternoon, the plan was in motion. The elk appeared, moving cautiously through the forest. Lily activated the calls, mimicking the sounds of predators circling the herd. The animals grew restless, shifting nervously as they tried to determine the source of the threat. Slowly but surely, they moved into the clearing. Exactly where Jake and Lily had predicted, Jake stepped forward, his movements silent and practiced. He carried a bow and arrow, a nod to humanity's ancient hunting traditions. Drawing the string taut, he took aim at a target, an older male elk that had strayed slightly from the group. The shot was clean and efficient, hitting its mark without hesitation. The elk fell instantly, its body collapsing onto the grass. For a moment there was silence. Then, faintly, they heard it, the whirring sound of the alien drone. It emerged from behind the trees, hovering silently as it observed the scene. Jake and Lily exchanged a glance, unsure of how the aliens would react. Instead of leaving, the drone lingered, scanning the area thoroughly. It circled the elk, studied Jake's bow, and even hovered near Lily as she recorded notes. When it finally drifted away, disappearing into the forest, both of them let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "Do you think they got the message?" Lily asked quietly. "I hope so," Jake replied, lowering his bow. "If not, we'll have to try again." As they packed up their gear and prepared to head back to the cabin, neither of them noticed the faint glow of another drone hidden high in the trees. Its lenses zoomed in on the pair, capturing every detail of their actions. Far above the planet, aboard the alien ship, Commander Vrax watched the footage intently. "These humans are intriguing," he murmured to Kale, his assistant. "Their methods are primitive, yet effective. They rely on strategy rather than brute force." Kale tilted his head, analyzing the data streaming across the screen. "Perhaps we underestimated them," he suggested. "Their ability to manipulate their environment is remarkable." Vrax nodded slowly. "Indeed, perhaps it is time we reconsider our assessment of this species." Back on the ground, Jake and Lily trudged through the forest, exhausted but satisfied. They weren't sure if their demonstration had worked, but they felt a sense of accomplishment nonetheless. For the first time since the aliens' arrival, they felt like they had some control over the situation. Unbeknownst to them, their actions had sparked a shift in the aliens' perspective. Humanity was no longer seen as a passive, harmless species, but as something far more complex. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the stage was set for a new chapter in the story of Earth and its visitors. The next morning, Jake and Lily woke up to a thick fog rolling through the forest. It clung to the trees like a blanket, muffling sounds and making everything feel eerily quiet. They hadn't slept much the night before, their minds replaying every detail of the demonstration they'd staged for the aliens. Had it been enough? Would the aliens understand what they were trying to show them? Or had they made things worse by revealing too much? As they ate a quick breakfast, Lily broke the silence. "Do you think they'll come back?" Jake shrugged, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "Hard to say. If they're still watching, they've probably seen everything by now." Lily frowned, staring out the window at the gray haze outside. "What if they decide we're dangerous? What if they attack?" "They won't," Jake said firmly, though he didn't sound entirely convinced himself. "They're not here to fight, they're here to study. That's why they sent those drones instead of landing again. If they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it already." Lily nodded, but her expression remained uneasy. She trusted Jake's instincts. He was usually right about these things, but this situation was unlike anything they'd ever faced. The thought of being judged by an alien species was both thrilling and terrifying. After finishing their meal, they decided to check the area where they'd set up the demonstration. Maybe there would be some sign that the aliens had responded, footprints, strange markings, or even another drone. Anything to give them a clue about what came next. The walk to the clearing felt longer than usual. The fog made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead, forcing them to move slowly and carefully. Every step seemed louder than normal, crunching against the damp leaves on the ground. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, but otherwise the forest was silent. When they finally reached the clearing, they found it exactly as they'd left it. The elk's body was gone, likely dragged away by scavengers during the night, but the grass was flattened where the herd had gathered. Knelt down, examining the ground closely. There were no unusual tracks or signs of disturbance, just the usual marks left by animals moving through the area. Nothing, he muttered, standing up and brushing dirt off his hands. No footprints, no burns, nothing. Lily sighed, leaning against a tree. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe our demonstration meant nothing to them. Before Jake could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, scattering leaves and lifting the fog slightly. Through the thinning mist, they saw something glinting in the sunlight, a small object resting on a nearby rock. It looked metallic, with the same shimmering surface as the shard they'd brought back from the first encounter. "What is that?" Lily asked, stepping closer. "I don't know," Jake replied, pulling on his gloves. "But I'm guessing it's not from around here." He picked it up cautiously, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than it looked, with smooth edges and no visible seams. On one side, faint symbols pulsed softly, glowing blue just like the ones on the alien ship. Unlike the shard, this object felt warm to the touch, almost alive. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, reaching out to touch it. Jake pulled it away quickly. "Careful," he warned. "We don't know what it does." Lily nodded, stepping back. "Do you think it's a message?" "Could be," Jake said thoughtfully. "Or it could be a warning. Either way, we should take it back to the cabin and figure it out." As they turned to leave, the air around them shifted. A low hum filled the space, growing louder with each passing second. Both of them froze, recognizing the sound immediately. It was the same noise they'd heard when the alien ship arrived. Above them, the fog parted, revealing a massive craft, descending silently from the sky. Its surface gleamed in the sunlight, reflecting colors that seemed to dance across its hull. For a moment, it hovered above the clearing, casting a shadow over everything below. Then, with a soft whir, landed gently on the ground. The door opened, and two figures emerged, aliens identical to the ones they'd met before. Their movements were calm and deliberate, exuding an air of authority. One of them held a device in its hand, glowing faintly as it scanned the area. The other carried a holographic projector, which it activated as soon as they stepped onto the grass. An image appeared in the air between them, a map of Earth, surrounded by stars. The continents were outlined in glowing lines, pulsing rhythmically. As though alive? Slowly the map zoomed in, focusing on the forest where Jake and Lily stood. Tiny dots representing animals began appearing, moving across the landscape in real time. Wolves, bears, deer, birds, all tracked and monitored by the aliens. "They've been studying us," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "And the animals?" Jake nodded, keeping his eyes fixed on the aliens. "They're showing us what they've learned." One of the aliens gestured toward the map, then pointed at Jake and Lily. The message was clear. They wanted to know how humans fit into the ecosystem. Were they hunters? Protectors? Something else entirely? Jake took a deep breath, stepping forward. "We're part of this world," he said slowly, pointing at the map and then at himself. "We adapt, we survive." The aliens tilted their heads, processing his words. Then one of them activated another hologram, showing images of humanity's greatest achievements, cities, technology, art, medicine. But alongside these accomplishments were scenes of destruction, deforestation, pollution, wars, and extinction. The contrast was stark, highlighting both the best and worst of what humans had created. "They're judging us," Lily murmured, gripping Jake's arm tightly. Jake nodded. "Yeah, and they're not sure what to make of us." For several minutes, the aliens continued their presentation, alternating between admiration and skepticism. Finally, one of them stepped closer, holding out the device it had been carrying. It projected a single question, written in glowing symbols. "Asterisk, are you predators?" Asterisk, Jake hesitated, unsure how to answer. To the aliens, predators were likely defined by strength, aggression, and dominance. Humans didn't fit neatly into that category. They were hunters, yes, but also thinkers, creators, and protectors. How could he explain all of that in a way they'd understand? "We're not just predators," Jake said finally, choosing his words carefully. "We're strategists. We use tools, knowledge, and teamwork to survive. We don't rely on brute force, we rely on intelligence. To illustrate his point, he mimed using a bow and arrow, then pointed at the elk carcass that had been removed. We hunt, but we do it smartly. We don't waste. We respect the balance. The aliens exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. Then, one of them gestured toward the object. Jake was holding the metallic device they'd left behind. He handed it over cautiously, watching as the alien examined it closely. After a moment, alien nodded, as though satisfied. They're testing us, Lily whispered to Jake, seeing if we can handle their technology. Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure what the test meant. Was it a reward, a challenge, or something else entirely? The aliens didn't stay long after that. They returned to their ship, taking the device with them as they prepared to leave. Before boarding, one of them turned back, projecting a final hologram. It showed Earth once again, surrounded by stars, but this time the planet glowed faintly. As though alive. The message was clear. The aliens weren't leaving because they were uninterested. They were leaving because they respected what they'd seen. As the ship lifted off the ground. Disappearing into the sky, Jake and Lily stood, in silence, watching until it was completely out of sight. Neither of them spoke for a long time, their minds racing with questions and possibilities. Finally, Lily broke the silence. Do you think they'll come back? Jake shook his head. I don't know. But if they do, they'll know better then. To underestimate us. Lily smiled faintly, though her eyes still reflected a hint of worry. Let's hope so. Together, they walked back to the cabin, the weight of the encounter settling over them like a second skin. Whatever happened next. They knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven itself capable of earning respect even from the stars. Days turned into weeks, and life in the forest slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Jake and Lily continued their work as wildlife researchers, tracking animals, collecting data, and documenting behaviors. But despite their efforts to focus on the familiar, the memory of the aliens lingered like a shadow. Every rustle of leaves, every strange sound in the distance, made them glance over their shoulders, half expecting to see another drone or ship hovering nearby. They didn't talk much about what had happened. It wasn't that they were avoiding the subject, it was just hard to put into words. How do you describe an encounter with beings from another world? How do you explain the weight of knowing that humanity had been judged and found worthy of respect? For now, they kept it to themselves, sharing only brief comments when the topic came up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake and Lily sat outside the cabin, watching the stars begin to appear. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. It was peaceful, almost serene, but neither of them could fully relax. What do you think they're doing now? Lily asked softly, breaking the silence. Jake shrugged, leaning back in his chair. Hard to say. Maybe they've moved on to another planet, or maybe they're still out there, watching. Lily frowned, wrapping her arms around herself. Do you think they'll come back? I don't know, Jake admitted. But if they do, I hope they remember what we showed them. Lily nodded, though her expression remained troubled. What if someone else finds out about all this? What if people start asking questions? Jake hesitated, then sighed. We can't control that. All we can do is keep doing our job studying the forest, protecting the animals. If anyone asks, we'll tell them the truth. But for now, let's just focus on what's in front of us. Lily smiled faintly, appreciating his calm demeanor. Jake had always been the steady one, the voice of reason when things got overwhelming. She trusted him completely, even if the future felt uncertain. The next morning, they woke up to find something unusual waiting for them outside the cabin. A small metallic object sat on the ground near the door, glowing faintly in the early light. It looked similar to the device the aliens had left behind during their last visit, but this one was different, smaller, simpler, and shaped like a flat disk. What is that? Lily asked, staring at it cautiously. I'm not sure, Jake replied, pulling on his gloves before picking it up. He examined it closely, turning it over in his hands. Unlike the previous objects, this one didn't pulse or hum. It was silent, almost inert. On its surface, faint symbols were etched, glowing softly in a pale blue light. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, reaching out to touch it. Jake pulled it away quickly. "Careful," he warned. "We don't know what it does?" Lily nodded, stepping back. "Do you think it's a message?" "Maybe," Jake said thoughtfully. "Or maybe it's a gift." They brought it inside and set it on the table, studying it from every angle. After several minutes, the symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into patterns that seemed familiar. Slowly, they realized it wasn't just random markings, it was a map. "A map of the stars. They're showing us where they came from," Lily said, her voice filled with awe. "They want us to know." Jake nodded, tracing the lines with his finger. "It's like an invitation." "For what?" Lily asked, confused. "I don't know," Jake admitted, "but it feels important." Over the next few days, they spent hours examining the disk, trying to decipher its meaning. It didn't provide any answers, at least. None they could understand, but it served as a reminder that the aliens hadn't forgotten about them. Whatever their intentions, they were still connected to Earth in some way. As time passed, Jake and Lily began to notice subtle changes in the forest. The animals seemed more active, moving through the trees with a sense of purpose they hadn't seen before. Even the weather felt different, cooler, crisper, as though the air itself had shifted. At first they dismissed it as coincidence, but the feeling persisted. One afternoon, while setting up a new camera trap near the river, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden among the rocks was a series of marking symbols identical to those on the disk. They were faint, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for, but they were unmistakably alien. "They've been here," Lily whispered, running her fingers over the marks. "They've been leaving signs." Jake nodded, his brow furrowed. "But why? What are they trying to tell us?" Before they could answer, a low hum filled the air, the same sound they'd heard during the aliens' visits. Both of them froze, exchanging wide-eyed looks. Slowly, they turned toward the source of the noise. Through the trees, they saw it, a massive ship descending silently from the sky. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the sunlight in dazzling patterns. As it hovered above the ground, the forest fell eerily quiet. As though holding its breath, the door opened and two figures emerged, aliens, just like before. Their movements were calm and deliberate, exuding an air of authority. One of them carried the holographic projector, which it activated as soon as they stepped onto the grass. An image appeared in the air between them, a map of the galaxy, with Earth highlighted in glowing blue. Slowly, the map zoomed out, showing countless stars and planets, each one pulsing faintly as though alive. Then the image shifted, focusing on a single star system far beyond Earth's reach. "They're showing us where they live," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, keeping his eyes fixed on the aliens. "They're inviting us." One of the aliens gestured toward the ship, then pointed at Jake and Lily. The message was clear. They wanted the humans to come with them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The idea of leaving Earth to travel across the stars and meet the alien civilization was both thrilling and terrifying. What would they find? What would they learn? And more importantly, would they ever return? Finally, Jake stepped forward. "If we go, we need to make sure we're ready," he said, glancing at Lily. "This isn't just about us, it's about representing humanity." Lily nodded, her heart pounding. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Jake admitted, "but I think we have to try. If they're willing to trust us, we owe it to them and to ourselves to take the chance." Together they approached the ship, their steps slow but determined. The aliens watched them closely, their expressions unreadable. When they reached the door, one of the aliens gestured for them to enter. Inside, the walls curved smoothly, creating a seamless interior that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Lights pulsed softly along the floor, guiding them forward. As the door closed behind them, Jake and Lily exchanged a glance. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Both of them knew this was the beginning of something extraordinary, something that would change not only their lives, but possibly the future of humanity itself. The ship lifted off the ground, rising higher and higher until the forest disappeared from view. Through the windows, they saw Earth growing smaller and smaller, its blue and green surface glowing faintly in the sunlight. For the first time, they truly understood how vast the universe was and how small their place in it really was. But as the stars stretched out before them, Jake and Lily felt a sense of hope. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready to face it together.